teaching you the art of industrial real estate. This is On Air with Team Jensen.
All right. Hello, listeners. Welcome to episode 10 of On Air with Team Jensen. We're very excited today to bring on some longtime clients of ours, U.S. Engineering. We have Tyler Nottberg and Tim Moormeier here with us today.
Friends and clients.
Friends and clients. Thanks for coming on with us today, guys.
Yeah, you're very
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, and really excited to dive into U.S. Engineering and what you guys are up to around the country. But before we get there, I'd love to highlight the two of you, and if you guys could share a little bit of background about where you kind of started in your careers and how you've ended up where you are today with U.S. Engineering. And you guys can go.
Well,
Tim's
the senior member of the team here, so he should go first.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tyler. So I came to U.S. Engineering in 1996. Shortly before I met Dan. In fact,
Right.
one of my first projects was
Lab
one of Dan's projects. But I went to college, University of Colorado Boulder, got a degree in engineering, architectural engineering, went to work for a mechanical MEP consulting firm in Denver, and had worked up through the company, become one of the principals in the organization. We had about 250 employees in the Denver and Cheyenne markets, in Atlanta actually. And probably the last 3-4 years that I was there, I formed a relationship with U.S. Engineering in Denver. And excuse me, at that time, the leadership out there was trying to learn how to get involved in work that was other than just hard bid work. And so they were partnering with engineers like myself to try to chase after design build work and things like that. And I formed a relationship with that team out in Colorado, and we started to jointly pursue work. And that was kind of how I got to know the company. Didn't know anything about them in Kansas City or the Midwest or anywhere else. I really only had exposure to them in the Denver market. And
you got to tell them about the direct discussion you had with Dennis Simonich.
Yeah, so the vice president of business development out there, Dennis, and I would meet on a monthly or twice a month basis to share project leads, and we had formed a pretty good relationship and had won a bunch of work together. And Dennis was about 20 years my senior, and the leadership team at U.S. Engineering at the time kind of had a gap in their management team in terms of age. They had a whole bunch of 50 and 60 plus year olds and kind of a gap, and then nobody in their 30s at that time. And they really saw a need to look for some succession plans. And Dennis would kind of make mention of, well, someday we'll work together, and like he'd prod around, like hinting that that I ought to consider going to work for U.S. Engineering. And one morning he said that. I said, Dennis, you either got to make an offer or don't ever bring it up again. And he looked at me and I said, no, I'm dead serious. Like, you either need to get serious and say you want to recruit me,
Right.
or I don't ever want to hear it again. And he said, okay. And got done with the breakfast. He went back to the office, I think, and went and met with Dwight. And then they probably called Tyler's dad in Kansas City. And later that day, I got a call from Dwight. And he said, yeah, we actually want to meet. And so we started meeting and talking about the potential for me to leave the partnership and come to work for U.S. Engineering. And it took several meetings. Tyler's dad, Skip, flew to Denver and met with me. This would have been in the spring of 96. And right around in May timeframe, I turned my resignation in at my partnership and took a month off, and then came to work for U.S. Engineering. And unfortunately, Tyler's dad passed away about 6 months later, 6 to 7 months later. He was fighting cancer at the time. But that's how my relationship with the organization started. And right after, I went to work. And when they recruited me, it was kind of, I look back on it now, and it's kind of funny. So they said, we're going to hire you as vice president in charge of pre-construction. I'm like, great, what's pre-construction? They're like, we don't have any idea. Like we didn't have anybody that does that. We feel like we need somebody that does that. You're going to figure that out for us. I'm like, okay. So I went to work for the company, and for 6 months tried to figure out like what's my role and responsibility, and how do I get engaged and help the organization. And for the first several months, it was 1 foot forward and 1 foot back until we could kind of figure that out. And honestly, it was a function of learning that my skill set was different than the business development people they had. I could go win work. I was good at winning work. But we had people that had good client relations, and I didn't need to go out and pound the street and find opportunities. What I needed is to find the right opportunity and make a difference on that. That's where I met you, Dan.
Sure.
So Lab 1 was a really good example of that, where a project that was going to be a design build type project, and I had a design background, but I was working for a contractor, which was unusual at that point in time, back in the mid-90s. And we started to develop means and methods of how to do work that way. And I think, when I look back at it, in the Rocky Mountain region, the organization was a little more progressive in terms of how to provide pre-construction services. In the Kansas City region, we didn't have any of that. U.S. Engineering was probably half of our work was industrial, like at Ford Claycomo plant and at National Starch and all these big industrial complexes. And the rest of the work was pretty well hard bid. And that's what we were. And, when I got started and then spent the first 2 years kind of helping us figure out how to win work, and we started to win some work like Lab 1 and some other projects like that, things started to grow in that direction, and the organization started to change. And after about 1.5 years, I made the decision to move to Kansas City. And at that point in time, I was promoted to be over what we called the eastern region of the company. So when Dwight and Skip, Tyler's dad, and Dennis hired me, the plan was, if I earned it, that I would be the next president of the company 10 years down the road. And Dwight was intending to retire in that time frame, 10 years down the road. So I knew I had that opportunity, and I had to earn it. I was given the opportunity, but I had to succeed. I came to the organization, and after 1.5 years, could see that if I wanted to really help lead it, I needed to be where the headquarters was. The banking, bonding relationships, our CFO, Bill Richards, was here. All the decisions were being made here, and that's where I needed to be. And so I moved our family to Kansas City in '98 and never looked back. And when I moved here, it was interesting because I would have been 34 years old, and I was put over Dan Oxler and Joe Finnegan, who were at that point they were 30 years older than me, and a lot more experience in the industry. And I was put over the Tennessee office as well. But I had these two guys that had been around forever in Kansas City, and my job was to kind of deal with the jump balls that fell in between them and then get us kind of positioned for future growth. And when I look back, I think a big part of the reason that they recruited me to come was to help make the company more progressive and to help us grow. So, and you look at the 27 years that I've been with the organization, and we've just seen incredible growth particularly over the last 15 to 20 years. We're positioned to do about $600 million in total revenue this year, and have more than a year's worth of backlog in hand. And what's going on in the U.S. right now is unbelievable, and it's unmatched worldwide when you start looking at the onshoring of manufacturing, the technology that's being manufactured here in the U.S., everything from battery plants to data centers to semiconductor facilities, and we participate in all of that, and it's driven a lot of our growth. And I honestly think having a company that buys into what strategic planning is, and we were lucky in one way, and another way you could say that we had a lot of good thoughts, but we came to market 10 years ago with an approach around manufacturing and doing things off-site at a time when a lot of these more advanced owners really wanted that kind of delivery method.
For the lack of better term, kind of kitting, right?
Prefabrication
Yeah,
of mechanical systems, and for us, we've taken it much further than anyone else that I know in the entire country, and that part of our organization is its own business, its own standalone profit loss business that manufactures not just for our own use, but for other mechanical contractors and direct to owners. And that's probably an area of potential biggest growth for us going forward because it's very scalable. And we'll get later maybe in this discussion into some of the work we're doing, but a lot of the really big, more advanced owners are coming direct to organizations like us to build portions of their buildings offsite and deliver those to their on-site locations. And in those cases, in many circumstances, we don't have any involvement in the installation of them. And so we've got, it's 9 digits of backlog in just that kind of work right now.
And a great new facility that is perfect for doing
That's
all
right.
that.
Gosh, how did we get that facility? I mean, who was involved in that?
No,
that was-
who knows? It was a
Dan,
great
Dan,
team.
Dan's the man.
So that's how I came to Kansas City. I was in the early 2000s. I was promoted to executive vice president, and then I was under Dwight and over everything else except for our CFO. And then Dwight retired a year early, and I was promoted to president about the same time Tyler came to the organization. And so then we worked hard on our partnership and have found a really good way to benefit each other and work together. And I think it's been great for both of us and the organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. When Tim moved to Kansas City, obviously, U.S. Engineering, gained a great individual, but so did the city of Kansas City. And I think you all know, especially being sort of native to Kansas City, we really like people who come here and who accept the city as their own. Tim might not cheer for all of our sports teams with the same vigor that we do, but for the most part he does, and I think that's good. So, my background, if Tim's was a little bit of a stretch for the organization, mine might be a little bit more of a stretch since I studied political philosophy and Japanese, which didn't exactly lend itself to the construction industry necessarily. However, as Tim described it, when I had the opportunity to come back about 19 years ago, I think a lot of the things that I was able to bring to the organization were very complementary to a lot of the skills that Tim had. And so our partnership from the very beginning is fundamental to the success of U.S. Engineering. And it's something that I deeply appreciate. Tim told the story about my dad passing away. Soon after he passed away, I'll always think of maybe one of my dad's crowning achievements was deciding to hire Tim. And I think that has been meaningful for the people at U.S. Engineering. I think it's certainly been meaningful for me personally, and definitely a lot of our customers as well too. So, and me certainly coming in with a background where I had gone to a small school in New England. I had gone to graduate school and lived over in England for a little while. My wife and I moved to Washington, D.C. Our daughter was born there, and we were trying to figure out how we could get back to Kansas City, where we were both from. Lee and I both grew up in Kansas City, and when the opportunity came up to come back and get involved in U.S. Engineering, Tim, in addition to so many others, were just incredible mentors to me because I never grew up working in the organization. I knew, basically what U.S. Engineering did, but I sort of had the opportunity to learn from the ground up, working in the warehouse for a little while, sort of opposite of Tim. As soon as I joined the organization, I moved out to Colorado because Dwight said this is going to be your best opportunity. He was living out in Colorado, was the head of the organization at the time. He said this is going to be your best opportunity to learn about what goes on out here in Colorado. And so I did that, then moved back to Kansas City, started working as a project engineer, and then one of my favorite stories to tell was one day I was working as a project engineer for Mark Oxler, who Tim had mentioned. Dan was running the construction group in the Eastern region. His son Mark was running a project out at Harrah's Casino, so I was working as a project engineer for him, putting together O&M manuals and doing whatever it was that I could to learn about the business. And Dan walks into my office and says, I got this little bathroom remodel project. I think it's time you need to learn how to kind of run your own project. I said, okay. He goes, well, meet me here tomorrow morning at 5:30, and we're going to drive up. It's at William Jewell College. So I said, okay. So I hopped in the car the next morning. Dan took me up to William Jewell. We walk into the kind of cafeteria area, and there's 30 people in there. There's plans all over the desk, and Dan starts introducing me around as the project manager for U.S. Engineering on all the work we're doing up at William Jewell. And I looked at him. I said, I thought you said this was a bathroom remodel. He goes, oh, there's a bathroom. There's a whole bunch of other stuff as well, too. But it was really through that experience that I learned, the value in particular of what our operations teams and field leaders, superintendents, foremen, general foremen, even the apprentices who are kind of on the front lines of the work that we do, the importance of those relationships and what they bring as craftsmen to the projects that we build, which, we frankly couldn't do without them. And so that's how I got involved in the organization. And it was through a lot of care and feeding from people who know a whole lot more than I do about this business, and multi-generations beyond the Nottberg family that have been involved that have really helped to kind of solidify my understanding and expand my understanding, and really embrace the opportunity for the Nottberg family to come back and get involved in U.S. Engineering. And here we sit, 19 years later.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, that's I have to admit the family history I found fascinating when we did the big grand opening for your Lawrence facility. A lot of those photos from way back when were pretty awesome to see, and it's pretty cool that you guys have that history that not only you can be proud of and look back on, but you actually have documentation of it that you can shine and show around all your facilities, which is pretty cool.
It really is. It's something that I think people take a great deal of pride in, and it's very easy to talk about the fact that we've been in Kansas City for over 130 years, but we've been out in Colorado for close to 70 years as well too. And that means that there are a lot of families involved in U.S. Engineering beyond the Nottberg family that have been involved for multiple generations. Yeah. Tim talks about the Finnegans and the Oxlers and the Joneses, and these are families that take a great deal of pride in what that history is. And I think we all know history can be something that strengthens and emboldens you, but it can also, if you're not too careful, you can call something a tradition when it's really a bad habit. Right. And one of the great things that Tim brought to the organization was this notion that we need to change. We need to think progressively about planning for the future. We need to think about always changing and adapting to what our customers need, rather than just simply continuing to do what we've always done. And that's been a really important aspect of how we leap from generation to generation, and those time periods are shortening a whole lot now. Maybe you had 10, 15 years to change in the past. You've got a few years to change now, or you're going to die.
Yeah, and I think a lot of business leaders feel that sentiment, and I think if you don't evolve with the times, it's easy to fall behind, like you're saying. So that all speaks to me for sure. Well, I mean, jumping around, do you have any projects in particular you want to highlight or jump
I just
into?
think it's telling. Our relationship together has been over the 20 plus years, where Tim and I worked first together on the Lab 1, but then we worked whenever it was you all were starting the new business, and you said we need to find a facility, and we started. You all had the vision, and for the Front Street building, which was no great shakes when you bought it, but you guys kind of fixed Humpty Dumpty up again, and grew your operation significantly there. And then to see the next step in your Lawrence facility, it's just been, your vision has been spot on. And I'm sure there's been some wrong turns or weaves in the road, but it's just from an outsider looking in, it's been very impressive and enjoyable to be a part of.
And I would say the pride that your company has throughout shows through.
Absolutely.
Even whether it's a project that I see you guys involved in, or even a project that we get to work on with you, it's very clear that everyone there feels like they're a part of the family and the team, and I think it's a cool atmosphere.
Yeah, we've had, I want to say, 1, 2, 3 pretty sizable real estate deals together that our real estate company owns, U.S. Engineering Real Estate. First one being the Front Street property. We had historically, excuse me, not self-performed sheet metal services in the Kansas City market. And we had self-performed that in Colorado for many years, and strategically decided with the way that we saw facilities developing to be able to coordinate all of those systems combined and build assemblies that are plumbing, piping, and sheet metal, we needed to control sheet metal as well. So we made a decision to go into the sheet metal business. And then we went out and looked for and found a building. And at the time, if you remember, Dan, we thought we need 20,000 square feet. And we ultimately bought a 75,000, almost 80,000 square foot building. And you know the
filled
story.
It up pretty quick.
And filled it up within a couple of years. Our company is an employer of choice. We didn't go buy another sheet metal company. We made it known in the city we were going into the sheet metal business, and people came and knocked on our door. And we hired the best of the best in the metro area, we feel. And went from not performing sheet metal on a job to performing all the sheet metal on the NNSA campus other than one building, as an example. So one of the largest projects built in the metro area was one of the ones we worked on. We went from that project to building the NBAF laboratory out in Manhattan, and decided that we really needed a building out in Manhattan to support that project, and thought that we could take advantage of that long term to be in that area. So we worked with you to look for and find a property there. We own a property in Manhattan now that we occupy about a quarter of the space with a service and construction office, and the other 3/4 is leased to the USDA, the people that are actually occupying the NBAF lab as the tenant. So our ultimate customer in that case has become our tenant long-term on that facility. As we moved further into the Front Street facility and filled up the 78,000 square feet, we also, during that exact same time frame, purchased a much larger fabrication facility in Colorado. That's one deal that you weren't involved in because it was out in Rocky Mountain region. Yeah. And that's about 110,000 square feet on 25 acres roughly. And immediately put that to use, and realized as we went through that facility that really, when you boil down what we want to try to do, what we want to try to build in assemblies in those plants and the number of product lines that we have, it takes between 100 and 150,000 square feet to execute what we want. And so, and that became really evident on Front Street, that 78,000 square feet was not going to be enough, and we didn't have the land around that building to support our needs. And so we worked with you to look for a new facility in this region, and ultimately landed on a brownfield site in Lawrence, where we built a brand new facility. Roughly 160,000 square feet on 27 acres. And it is first-class, top-notch prefabrication facility in the whole country. It's amazing. So we formed a company entirely around manufacturing those products. There's a lot of story about what's going on there. We have a relationship with a wholesaler nationally that's promoting that service through them. So we have a relationship with Ferguson. You probably know who Ferguson
Sure.
is. We approached Ferguson about a year and a half ago with the idea that we're going to go to market with these products to any mechanical contractor that wants to buy them, and owners. Why wouldn't we partner with you guys and do that? They partnered with us, and we're working together jointly nationally on that approach. So they actually have all of their district managers out there promoting manufactured product that they can buy manufactured by us in either Johnstown or Lawrence and shipped to a project site nationally. Wow. We have our first project with them for Intel on a semiconductor facility in Arizona right now that's getting ready to come into our shop in Lawrence. So that relationship we're very excited about. It's part of our strategy long term to keep those facilities busy. And we've had pretty significant amount of work run through those two facilities. So 2 years ago, we averaged over 200 workers for the year just in manufacturing, plumbing, piping, sheet metal in those two buildings. And I don't know anybody else that can come close to those numbers nationally. So, and it's going to grow. It's just going to keep growing.
Yeah, I can only imagine what's on the horizon for reshoring, and like you've been talking about. I mean, we're seeing it here locally with Panasonic, but
Right.
at some of these national conferences we go to, it seems like almost every market has a big semiconductor plant or a new EV battery plant coming in, and I can only imagine you guys are going to be fielding a lot of future calls with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we are about 3/4 of the way through a pretty large battery plant, out in the kind of southeast part of the country for a company called Microvast. As you know, we do a lot of hyperscale data center work across the country. We have 2 very large customers that we do that work for. We're on our 4th data hall in Tennessee with that customer, and we have a new site with that customer down in Dallas just getting started. Those data halls are very large. They're 50 to 80 megawatts usually for one data hall, which in mechanical terms is a $50 to $100 million contract, which doesn't include equipment and subs. So it's just on the scale of very, very, very large projects. You mentioned Panasonic. We have a contract out at Panasonic now, a pretty large contract to do a pretty good piece of that. I know that you guys were involved in some of the land deal out there when that came about. And we're just getting started in that with Panasonic, so we're excited about that. We do a lot of work for a company called Broadcom in Colorado. They make the computer chips for a lot of the iPhones. And we've been working on their site for now 25 years, roughly. And one other facility we have in Colorado, I haven't really probably talked to you two about too much, is we do have a clean room fab space out there for doing the piping that go into the clean spaces in semiconductor and pharmaceutical spaces. So it's a clean room environment where you can fabricate high purity piping systems. Very specialized, but that's what we have to do for the semiconductor facilities, for the high purity pipe, and for the pharmaceutical work that we do out there. So a lot of potential opportunity with Broadcom still ongoing, and then all of this work that we do in the data center side is turned into the biggest customers in the U.S. going straight to manufacturers like us for big components of their data center sites.
Wow. Are there projects with them that you're looking at outside of the United States?
We have not looked at any outside of the U.S. with Meta. We've looked outside of the U.S. with our customer we call Bruno.
Okay.
We've not been successful outside of the U.S. from a foreign standpoint. We've shipped product over to Hawaii on one project before, where we manufactured it, containerized it, and sent it to Hawaii for a project there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about data centers and Kansas City. Kansas City forever has been known as a distribution market, a manufacturing marketplace, and for years, data centers were not so much. They were in the Northeast, they were out in Arizona, but it seems like every day you pick up the paper and read about or hear about another data center coming to town or another. We've seen a lot of it out at Astra. There's a lot of challenges that brings as far as power, water. I mean, you know them all. Do you see, is Kansas City unique in the changing paradigm, or is that just happening everywhere?
It's happening everywhere. The reason that it's coming to Kansas City now is availability of power that's cheap and has multiple sources and is reliable. So we've been involved in data centers in the Kansas City metro for 20, 30 years. Most of those during that time frame had been direct to owners like banks. Okay, so could have been for State Street, or Boatman's, or UMB, or Commerce. We've done data centers for all of them. We did all the data centers for Cerner for many years, for example, on their campuses. And then, like one of the first data centers that was built in the area that was more of a co-locate was Sprint had a solution, if you remember, called eSolutions for a while. And they were trying nationally to go build data centers around the country that would be co-locate type centers. And we built 2 of those for them, one in Denver and one here.
Was it out on 470?
It was out in Lee Summit, yeah.
A spec building?
Yeah.
That you converted?
Right. was. And so then things started to go that direction. Well, what's changed is now these really big players. So, think of the Fortune 5 technology companies. All of them are in this space. And they build these on a scale that hasn't ever been seen before. So if you were to walk into one of these hyperscale data centers, if you drop somebody in the middle of that and they don't know what they're in, they'd look around, they could not tell you it's a data center because it does not look like the old school data centers. The old data centers had raised floors, had computer room air conditioning units. These have none of that. It's a completely different construction methodology. Big air handling units. The server racks are separated by hot and cold aisles, and those server racks might be 15 to 20 foot tall. They're now transitioning. The AI machines actually put out more heat, and so they're transitioning to water-cooled processors. So one of the other lines of work that we're doing a lot of right now for our customer Bruno is converting over existing data centers to AI data centers by going back into the live data centers and installing piping to water-cooled processors as they change the machines out. So no sooner than within 2-3 years after we build them, we're back in them retrofitting them.
One of the things that kind of came up in some discussions with some of the executives from some of those companies is the question of how underbuilt do you feel like you are in terms of capacity relative to what's going to be needed for the new economy in terms of AI, et cetera. They said we're probably at about 10% of what we need right now.
Jesus.
So if you're at 10% about what you need right now, the idea that this is going to slow down anytime soon is farcical. In terms of Kansas City, to put it in an even better, maybe more positive context for our future, I think back to what Tom Honig, who was the president of Kansas City Federal Reserve many years ago, said about the greatest strength of Kansas City's economy is that it doesn't have a greatest strength. We have the ability to absorb and adapt as these kinds of trends come out, so we have the capacity to welcome those kinds of elements of the economy to Kansas City in a way that allows us to really help them, assist them, add value. Personally, I'd also like to think that our reputation of having built a lot of data centers around the United States becomes an attractive thing for a company to consider when they wonder whether or not that infrastructure is going to be built out, which goes to the whole question of what trends in labor look like and what the capacity is for companies to even meet owners' needs when they say, we want to build a big new facility, because we're reaching a point where it's become more and more difficult for construction companies to say, well, yeah, we can do that for you because maybe we have the people, maybe we don't have the people. And that's a real concern going into the future.
Yeah. No, we saw some of that at Panasonic when they came to town and said, 4 million square feet, and that's a mega setup and lots of manpower, but they seem to be, getting after it.
Yeah, you drive by that site, it's amazing how much steel is up in the air already, and the work that's come to us is coming fast, and the manpower requirements are significant, and it's not easy work out there.
No.
So a lot of the work's high in the air, a lot of it's going quickly. Safety becomes a real concern. It's another reason why doing as much work off-site is going to be better. So trying to figure out how to manage all of that and do it safely is like number one priority.
What about this AI? What about, sci-fi, where all of a sudden we're all working for the computers, or it's curing cancer, or,
Do we need to have a discussion about zeroth hour or anything along do we need to pull out our Isaac Asimov novel, robot novels or anything along those lines? One of the things that I think is really interesting just internally at U.S. Engineering is we have a lot of these discussions, and I think if you had asked anyone, say, 10, 15 years ago, how many people are you going to have at your organization doing coding, just spending all day doing coding? Or how important is that going to be to your organization? You just sort of look at each other going, coding, what are you talking about? We weld pipe, we put sheet metal in the air, what coders? Well, this is a very real thing for us, not only because we think that it's important to be able to integrate all these platforms from a technology standpoint on everything from project management software to your ERP, et cetera, but obviously there's been a lot that's been in the works from DeepMind and OpenAI for years and years, but ChatGPT really brought it to the retail scale, so everybody has started talking about it. But there have been people who've been thinking about this and working on it for years and years, neural networks, parallel processing, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that I think we're really focused on internally at US Engineering is understanding the difference between using those kinds of tools as opposed to solutions. And we had a discussion the other day about how far do you want to go with this particular type of technology to be able to just simply shove something through an AI, bot and say, well, we've done the review. We've been able to determine that, the AI said it was fine. ChatGPT said it was fine. So let's go with that on our contract terms, et cetera. But you don't want to discount the importance of the human element of that for a couple of reasons. From a risk management standpoint, but also what's the message that you're sending to the rest of your team members about how important they are to actually making decisions. So, there's the AI component of things that we're participating in by building all these data centers, and then there's the AI component of things in terms of how we're going to utilize that as an industry and as a company on a go-forward basis. There's lots of real advantages, but it's not the answer for everything.
Yeah, we actually supported ChatGPT almost immediately. So our technology team brought that in-house, set up a corporate account, embedded it within our intranet, and started training people on how to use it. And have continued to work with it around things like reading contracts, doing searches for documentation. You can say, go find me any documentation on this job related to this piece of equipment or this item, and it'll go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents and bring them back to you immediately. Literally, as we were walking down the hallway coming here, Tyler and I talked with our CFO, who I had sent a document to review earlier, that ChatGPT wrote for me. And I did about 10 prompts to get it to write what I wanted. I wanted about 500 to 1,000 words. I gave it 15 topics I wanted it to cover, from what perspective I wanted it written. And it wrote it, and I sent it to our CFO for a review and edit. He sent it back to me in 5 minutes, and we were done. When you learn how to use the prompts and you learn how to use the system, it's really powerful. And if you set that up as a corporate account, the information you share with it doesn't become part of the public domain. If I set up a personal account at home, everything I give to it goes into the public domain. It goes into its answer set that it's looking at all the time. But the corporate accounts are protected by a firewall. And so it's,
This is because you set it up that way?
No, that's the way they are with ChatGPT. And the costs for running it from a commercial standpoint are so insignificant, it's incredible. Like for the first month, I think we had a bill of $31 for all the people literally in the organization that were using it.
Wow.
And it's gone up since then, but we're not talking about thousands of dollars to set this up and run it. We're talking about very small fractions. And so, for example, and Tyler talked about coding. We've had a software development team in place for over 10 years. At one point we had 10 developers in-house. We have about 4 now, and we have an outside firm we use for overflow work. But what we found is that a lot of the mid-level coding can be done 80% by ChatGPT. So a coder can give it directions, and it'll go write language, bring it back to you. It's not going to be correct, but it's going to get 80% of it.
It's going to build the format.
You build a lot of language, and then you go in and you have a more senior person review that and finish it. And so we're continually finding areas and ways in which that's going to be beneficial. I mean, one obvious area where in our industry this becomes, I think, really relevant is coordinating buildings. So why can't I give it all of the plans, and it can figure out what's running into what and make everything fit? Why can't it do that? It should be able to do that. It's just spatial coordination stuff. That's going to happen. And you're going to end up having BIM drawings created in unbelievable amounts of time that we can't get close to today.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's going to happen. And it's not far away either.
Right.
How are you all using AI or ChatGPT
Well,
here?
similarly, I think it can grow your bandwidth exponentially. I mean, we haven't done a corporate account like you're talking about, so now I'm sitting here thinking, well, maybe I need to quit feeding it some information on my private account. But I use it from, to your point, you can't just spit out whatever it gives you. I've used it for prospecting for various ways, and I don't want to give out too many secrets, but it's
our vast listening
But yeah,
audience.
I pay for the monthly deal where I have internet access, so you can kind of have the internet brain behind it, and it's amazing what you can just kind of learn through the prompts too of what it will tell you, and you kind of learn how to ask it the right questions and kind of where to push it, and I mean it's. Like I said, it's just the bandwidth is just insurmountable how much you get back. It's just.
But you guys are light years ahead of us on your use of it. It sounds like
company-wide, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because you always have the option with these new technologies about how hard you want to lean into using them,
Right.
and so you can maintain an appropriate level of skepticism about what they can do for you. But I mean, one of the great things about, I think, a lot of the culture at U.S. Engineering is this kind of willingness to tinker. We have a lot of people who like to tinker. I mean, it's reflected in people who like to do woodwork or mechanical projects on the side, et cetera. But I can't think of too many technologies that have entered into what we do where our organization, or more importantly, the people within our organization, are fearful of them or shy away from them. That doesn't mean change is very easy, but what it does mean is that we've got a lot of individuals who are always willing to look and experiment and try out what those new technologies are. So this is just sort of like the latest in that category in a lot of ways.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is intimidating in a lot of manners, but I will admit, because I also haven't drilled down on it like I should, but it is.
You need to actually just to go experiment with it. Yeah. I mean, my first interaction with it was, of all things, I had decided to buy a new pair of skis. And I decided, I wonder what skis ChatGPT would recommend I buy. And so I just did a very simple prompt. Can you help me figure out what the best pair of skis to buy are? And it came back with 10 questions that were all completely relevant. Where do you ski? How well do you ski? What's your age, your weight, your ability? Do you like to make turns? Do you like to ski in the deep snow? Do you go into the trees? Do you go off piste? Do not? And I answered all these questions, and it came back with like 4 answers that were all skis that I looked at, but not ones that I had chosen. So then I asked it, those are all nice, but what do you think of this pair? And it came back with a review of the ones I bought and how they differ from what these others were. I did that all in a matter of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And the internet's fast, but this is incredible what it'll do for you.
Oh yeah.
So it's just amazing, and so I think you get examples like that, and you can do document comparisons in a snap of a finger. Like, compare this contract to that one, tell me where it's different. And it'll come back and highlight those areas that are different. You can, in our case, we're reading and signing a lot of contracts, and we know what kind of indemnity language we like and don't like, what kind of delay damages we like and don't like, and you can teach it those things, and then it looks for those and brings them back, says these are a concern. So you can get to that point really fast. Like, well, that saves a ton of time.
Sure.
So it's like Tyler said, you could say, like, we're not going to adopt that because we're worried about what people will do. And we took a different approach and said, you know what, go play with it. Okay, but be mindful of all of this. This is behind the firewall, so nothing you share with it is going back to the public, but also be mindful we're not going to put any customers' data or anything into this. And let's start figuring out how we can use it. And if you can imagine, certain project management softwares like Procar and things help manage documents, but it won't go search and find the kind of language things that you're looking for. I mean, the large language models are just that. So if I'm looking for a combination of things, it'll find it way faster.
Sure.
So it's very powerful that way.
When you guys brought it up to speed, did you have to, I'm sure you had to insert the brain of your entire network into it. So
it has access to our intranet, yes.
Yeah.
So it has access to everything that we give it access to.
So that's how it can pull any
Yes.
file with relation to X or
Yes.
Y.
And it's not it. We call it HAL.
How? You have a name for it?
But
I was like,
it can even be used for something like, hey, can you tell me the maternity leave policy?
yeah.
It'll go search our our benefit plans, and it'll come back and say, here's what your plan is. So really simple things like that, like if somebody is trying to find any kind of an SOP sort of circumstance within the organization, it has access to all those documents.
And you mentioned that a lot of the new AI data centers create more heat, generate more heat.
They do.
Because they're bigger, they're thinking like harder.
I don't know technically the answer. I think the actual silicon chips are larger, and they're doing more calculations per square millimeter of space, and so it's more power. That power's got to go somewhere. It goes into the air.
So an AI computer is a different computer, different machine than just taking a bunch of them,
Yes.
getting more computers together.
Yes, it is. It's a different machine. And they tip over into water cooled. I think a lot of the hyperscale data centers we're involved in now going forward are all being designed around water cooled processors. And who knows where that'll go in the future. I know there's all kinds of things being looked at, even submersing the machines in the ocean, for example.
I've seen some of that before.
Yeah. So there's
The
some
fish love it.
some very interesting technologies being looked at because of what's going on there.
I would have to imagine the salt water would be pretty problematic, but
You would think.
that's what you guys are for. You can figure that stuff out.
Yeah, maybe. But it's fascinating to see what's happening and how fast that changes. And to Tyler's point earlier, we've seen firsthand the programs of the big 3 or 4 that are building these data centers over the next 5 to 10 years, and their forecasts are a little mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's very interesting to be involved in an aspect of the U.S. economy where we're actually building out the infrastructure. And you sort of wonder periodically whether or not Linda Hamilton's going to show up and try and, prevent the singularity from happening in one way or another. But, at the same time, it's something that I think a lot of our team members take a great deal of pride in. And it could be an office building, it could be a data center. But actually crafting and building things, I think it's something that, Kansas City, U.S. Engineering, and a lot of our other offices have, team members that take a great deal of pride in, like getting done with the work at the end of the day, and you can go see your built product. I mean, it's very, very
absolutely.
satisfying. And when you look out into the next 5, 10, 15 years, I think it's a very big opportunity for the construction industry in general to try and find ways to become more and more progressive, to get safer, to do more, faster, better, cheaper, all those sorts of things. I think we're going to end up being in a real golden age of construction in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I know earlier you said that the groups building out data centers they think they're at about 10% of what they need for the future. Where do you see that number being in 5, 10, 15? I mean, do you think it's a 5, 10-year window to get caught up and get past the halfway mark, or do you think it's going to be a 20, 30-year run of this kind of stuff? Hard to say, but
Well, I think what Tim said, it's hard to say because they're going back in facilities
evolving
they built 2 years ago and modifying them. I mean,
Yeah, and we can't actually predict it very well. So this has been the one real challenge with that work is, so we've been on a consulting agreement with our customer we call Bruno for better part of 10 years. So we and actually Faith Technologies locally were invited to help them figure out how to build data centers faster at the hyperscale side. So they were trying to get a 120 megawatt data center that would take 18 months to build traditionally and done in 9 months. That's what they were trying to do. Start to finish, like when we say go, 9 months, we want to build a 100 megawatt data center. So that's so fast, you got to think differently on how you do that. And you do that by taking a lot of the work off site and standardizing on a lot of that. So you've already got standards for assemblies, and you know how many of them you need for the data center. So if you tell me where it's going, I can start building those tomorrow. And then I basically roll that concept out. It's almost a prototype out across the country. And they went about doing that. We in Faith and another general contractor outside of this area worked with them for a year in a virtual environment to try to figure out how to optimize the schedule, the budget, and the efficiencies of construction. and then they execute that for a certain period of time, and then they step back and they do it again. They start over with new ideas and concepts, and now it's water-cooled machines and it's a different layout. And we'll get these programs that say, we're going to roll out 10 data halls in the U.S. in the next 12 months, and get ready. Okay, so we're getting ready, and then it'll pause with no notice. And we don't know for how long it's going to pause. It might pause for a month, it might pause for a year. And then if it gets hot again, they might immediately award 6 of them, and it just goes like crazy. So it's been very much, it's impossible for us to predict. I will say that. We can't tell where geographically the next one is going to go.
Chat PT hasn't been helpful.
No, it's not been helpful.
Tough to look around those corners.
We've multiple times had data centers awarded to us and got started and then been paused. They come back. Usually it's just a matter of timing. How they make the decision on whether to build in Nashville or Dallas or Kansas City or LA or Atlanta is, I really don't know the answer to that. I can tell you this is an actual true story though. We were talking to them about what is driving this, and a little bit tongue in cheek, real senior guy in the room.
What do you think? Before Tim tells you what is driving all this?
All the expansive growth of data centers?
Yeah, like why is this growing so much? What physically is happening that's causing them to have to do so much of this?
Number one reason.
It was tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. Then he told us it was true. You want to know what it was?
I'm scared to say.
Gaming?
No, I think it's something worse.
Cat videos.
Oh, really?
I was thinking it's people posting the damn little cat videos and others that want to see that instantaneously no matter where they are. So not all cat videos, but it's exactly that issue. It's social media posting videos that people want to have access to instantly, no matter where they are, whether they're in the West Coast, the East Coast, the Midwest, whatever. And he goes, honestly, there's more cat videos than almost anything out there that people are pulling up instantaneously to watch. Well, and they have to respond to it.
We can blame my mom and his wife for that. She's watching probably half of them.
She's a cat person. We've become such an instantaneous, well, look at Amazon,
right.
Society. We want it when we want it, not when you can get it to us. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's just as true in construction as well. So, all of these jobs that we're doing, especially on the data center side of things, it's really pushed us as an organization to change a lot of our methodologies and to improve what our efficiencies look like, improve what our safety records look like, improve all of these means and methods for how we go about doing our work. And owners that aren't data center owners certainly benefit from that. So I think when you go out there and you talk with customers about whether or not you want U.S. engineering on a job, there's a whole bucket full of reasons why they want U.S. engineering on those jobs. And that's because we've pushed ourselves so hard to be at the tip of the spear of how buildings are being built and what the methodologies are that need to be used, and all of the people that are really all in on trying to figure out how to do that better. And so I think we've benefited not just on the data center or the hyperscale side of things, but every project that we do. We're always thinking about, how do we do this in a way that is more progressive? Because frankly, most of the time when you drive around and you look at a construction site, it's being done in a similar way that the Egyptians were building the pyramids 5,000 years ago. So the construction industry, I think when you look at how much the construction industry has invested in R&D as a percentage of revenue, we're bottom 2 industries of all industries around the world. So it's ripe for disruption, and it certainly gives us a whole opportunity to try and figure out, how are we going to continue to bring or add value to what's going on.
Absolutely. No, and again, from our experience working together, just your safety records, your emphasis on safety, your emphasis on procedures, it's been impressive. It really has.
Well, your partnership's been tremendous.
Likewise. Thank you.
Those customers are the most demanding customers. Also, I would just say, like we've felt like we understood quality and the demands of customers, and I would just tell you they've pushed us to a whole nother level of what do you have to do to verify that you're doing work appropriately? Are you measuring the right things? Or are you measuring the wrong things, and how do you know? And, there's one thing in compliance and there's another in documentation, but if you're measuring something and you never, ever, ever have a nonconformance, then you're measuring the wrong thing. Because nonconformance happens in our industry, and you need to figure out where nonconformance is happening and measure it and get that feedback loop in place. And these customers are unbelievably demanding in processes like that. And it's, we've taken circumstances like that and said, well, rather than setting up a special program for Bruno, why don't we just learn from it and do it that way everywhere? So it just becomes part of what you do.
Yeah.
And so it's been a very interesting learning experience, to be honest, and helps us in everything we're doing. And like Tyler said, the speed of market, all of these, if there's one thing that we all know right now with interest rates going up, construction loans don't want to be any longer than they need to be for obvious reasons. Schedule really matters. Quality really matters, and you have to be competitive with your price. Those all have to coexist. They have to. And the best way to do that is to work off-site and on-site at the same time and figure out how to bring it together.
Yeah.
You guys have got it going on, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, and I think we're getting close to our time window, but really appreciate you guys coming on. And I feel like I could sit here and talk with you guys about what the future looks like for another day or two, but we'll have to jump. But if there's anyone that wants to learn more about U.S. engineering or any, potential suitors that are, maybe going to be graduating soon with degrees, what's your best piece of advice as far as reaching out and trying to get connected or find a path to joining the team at U.S. Engineering?
Well, you can certainly follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can, look that up online, but you can also go directly to our website, www.usengineering.com. We keep it updated, everything from, news articles and articles that are written by people internally to job postings, and you can learn a little bit about all of the companies that are part of the U.S. Engineering family.
Yeah, and I would say reach out through our HR team if you're looking for an opportunity. There are dozens of openings in our organization in different locations as well as Kansas City right now. In all of our companies, we have 4 operating companies: U.S. Engineering Construction, U.S. Engineering Innovations, U.S. Engineering Service, and U.S. Engineering Metalworks. They all do something a little different, and they all have openings. I'm certain of that right now. And then reach out to us on LinkedIn if you're wanting to connect at the executive level. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch. And then we'll go from there.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Welcome.